Welcome to another episode of Wisdom Wednesday, where we come here to support you in all life challenges. Today, we're going to talk about a topic ADHD. I have been hearing this word a lot lately from our members from our group, but I still don't have much understanding about it. Like a lot of us, we're confused about what does ADHD look like? What are some of the things that we find out in our midlife stages it is because of ADHD? So today I have an amazing expert here coming to talk about it. Hi, Kirsten. Thank you so
I'm
much for joining our platform today.
Hi Martha. It's my pleasure because hey, I get to talk about two of my favorite topics, one of which is ADHD and one of which is midlife women and menopause and all the rest. So yeah, you're giving me the opportunity just to kind of, I don't know, talk about an obsession of
It is
mine.
amazing because, like, that's the truth. I don't really know what ADHD mean. And
Mm,
recently, I have a friend, like two friends in the
mhm.
group, that actually said, "Oh, I've been diagnosed with ADHD at our 40s." So, what does that mean? Like, how does that affect our life? How much more understanding can it give us?
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe I'll go back to the beginning. So
Mm,
ADHD actually stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. A lot of us ADHDers, because I'm an ADHDer, would actually some of us have mixed feelings about the term disorder being tacked on the end because it certainly implies that it's not a good thing,
mm,
and yet there are many gifts that ADHD kind of brings, for those of us who are ADHDers. And at the same time, though, sometimes the word disorder fits because we often talk about how the world is set up for neurotypicals. So ADHD fits into the family of neurodiversity, neurodivergence, and I guess the world is, typically set up for people whose brains work a certain way, and ADHDers can at times find that challenging. And so that can be where we feel at a disadvantage, and where some ADHDers definitely identify with the word disorder, more from the perspective of, I find the world challenging. That's what they would say. And then others of us would, I think, kind of have some struggles with that. It's also a little bit misleading because in many ways, we don't have difficulties paying attention when we're very interested in things or when things are super urgent. In fact, our brains, ADHD brains, are built and wired to respond best when we're absolutely interested in something. So anything new, novel, interesting to us, or when there's a heap of urgency required. And that's when we function at our best. What they're not wired so well for is to be doing the things that are important, but not necessarily interesting or urgent. And so for us, we can be what's called hyper focused. We can be, I used the word obsessed before. So the areas of ADHD, midlife, and menopause are my obsessions. I just find them absolutely fascinating. I can lose complete track of time reading about this stuff, learning about this stuff, talking about this stuff, hearing about this stuff. Like, it really, really, I thrive on it. But if you were to ask me to try and pay attention to something that wasn't interesting, I would find it very, very difficult to regulate my attention, which means I'd find it difficult to attend to what I needed to attend to, because at that point, I'm going to be distracted by a whole bunch of other things. My experience of ADHD, I like to describe a bit like 50 tabs open on my computer, which a lot of people will say, a lot of ADHDers and neurotypical people will say, yeah, that's how my brain works. The difference is that I either get obsessed with one tab because it's so interesting to me, and yet I should be working on the other things on the other tabs, or I just can't finish anything. So I'm constantly starting different things on different tabs and not following through. So that's where the attention kind of factor comes into it. And it's because there's an area of our brain and it controls what's called our executive functioning. And part of the executive functioning, or the skills and the capacities that we have in that area, things like planning, organization, initiation of tasks, monitoring how we're going with tasks, completing things. Emotion regulation is part of that as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that is impacted by our wiring. We're just wired differently, and therefore how that shows up for us is different typically to the neurotypical person.
That is
That's a really long
amazing.
answer.
Yeah, but no, it's great because please explain to us like your background as well, because I can't like we kind of jump into it because
Yeah, we
I know
did.
who you
We
are
did.
already. We spoke before, but for the
Yeah.
people that who doesn't know, like how come she can speak it this way? Please tell
Yeah.
us who you are as well.
Sure. So I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist. I have run many businesses. I've run a group psychology practice in Perth for 18 years, had a couple of other businesses along the way. Started a business recently called All About Her, the Centre for Menopause. And so, yeah, my areas of interest are in, I guess, assessing and working with women who either think they're ADHDers, so that's the assessment process, or they know they are, and they're wanting to understand what that means for them. And it's all within the context of being midlife as well. And so I don't assess kids, I don't work with kids, I don't even work with young women. I work with midlife women, either who aren't ADHDers, but who are experiencing all the joys and challenges that midlife and menopause, perimenopause brings. And also then women, midlife women who wonder or know that they're ADHDers. That's where my personal and professional interests lie. I am now postmenopausal, but definitely I'm 50 in December, so I'm definitely midlife. Well, maybe not chronologically unless I live to 100, but like I'm in that midlife stage. And I'm a late diagnosis ADHD as well. So yeah, it's got those overlaps for me of lived experience, but also a lot of professional experience in this space.
Yeah, because I hear a lot of people saying about ADHD and hearing that understanding of
Mm,
why it is actually important to diagnose ourselves. And I sort
mm.
of giving myself that self-diagnose as well. It's like, I honestly think I have ADHD as well. Because if you're talking about like working and like helping people working onto this hour space here, I can work to 2 a.m. in the morning. As
Mhm.
soon as you ask me to clean the room that I had, like my office, oh my God, I'm thinking,
Yeah,
okay, when do I book the cleaner to come in and deal with it?
yeah,
Like, it's
yeah.
just not my area of interest for some reason. And understanding that really makes a difference, isn't it?
Definitely, definitely. And look, a lot of people would say cleaning the house isn't interesting to them either. The difference is for ADHD is there's a neurotransmitter called dopamine that's really, really relevant to to our brain. And it's kind of a neurotransmitter that helps motivate us. Um, and what we find, there is a there is some kind of there's a couple of possibilities as to how dopamine functions or how it doesn't function for ADHDers. So there's certainly research that shows that perhaps we don't have as much dopamine. There's
Oh.
also some research that indicates that maybe it's not that we don't have less than someone else, we don't have
Mhm.
less dopamine than someone else, but we don't use it as efficiently.
Um,
But either way, if you think of dopamine as a neurotransmitter that is part of what is a motivating neurotransmitter, the difference for ADHD is when it comes to cleaning the room, cleaning their bedroom, doing their washing, doing their taxes, all of those things, is that someone who, a neurotypical person, their dopamine will provide the motivation for them to do a task that's not interesting but is important.
mhm.
For us, we think about those tasks and we don't have our dopamine, being produced and being used in a way that motivates us. So the neurotypical person can say, this is boring as batshit, but
Yeah,
it's really important. And I know I'll feel better when it's done.
yeah.
And that actually generates the idea and the outcome, them imagining it helps produce that motivation. For us, that's not the case. And so this is the challenge with people for people with ADHD, is there's all these kind of normal expectations, kind of adulting, although we should also, kids can do some of these things when they're younger, of course, but definitely there's a whole bunch of adulting that is just boring. Like, it's just boring.
Yeah.
And we can really struggle with that. And if we don't know that we're ADHD is, then unfortunately what also happens is we then beat ourselves up about it. We get labeled by others as lazy. We get labeled by others as unmotivated, lazy, difficult, messy, always late, because time blindness is another factor as well that we can struggle with. And there's all this negative messaging. And we definitely know that when kids are undiagnosed and they go through their life not knowing they're ADHD, they get all these messages. Life is really, really tricky. They start to take on these beliefs about the messages about themselves. And so they end up with quite a poor self-esteem as a result. The interesting thing, though, is often the picture of ADHD, certainly the diagnostic criteria, like all health issues, has largely been based on how ADHD shows up in boys. And it looks very different typically in girls and in women, which is why so many girls and women haven't been diagnosed. It's changing a little bit now because we know more about how it looks different in females. But that's why midlife women, Gen Xers, are starting to wonder and realize and be diagnosed as ADHD, because we know that the diagnostic criteria hasn't actually reflected the female experience and expression of ADHD until more recently. So a lot of people say, oh, they're just jumping on the bandwagon. It's trendy to be an ADHD. Everyone wants to be ADHD. Well, you know what? If you don't have to be ADHD, you maybe don't want to be. Although I wouldn't change it for the world, because it's certainly helped me in many, many ways in my life, particularly my career. But the reality is, this is why it's happening. It's not that people are jumping on the bandwagon. It's actually that we as professionals know more about how it shows up.
Oh, that is so good.
Super important.
It really cleared up a lot of the air, because it is so true that what you say, a lot of us that feel like that, even for me personally, I find that I feel so embarrassed that the house is not at top seat. I feel embarrassed that I need to actually get a cleaner to come in. And I know that for a little while, that just my brain don't function when things are messy. That's why I try to keep it as neat as possible. If not, my brain just doesn't function. And I have a tendency of feeling really down on myself and say, every woman in this society are expected to clean their house, do their washing, do their cooking and things like that. Why am I so not interested? And I'm like eating, okay, it's a survival mechanism, isn't it? Even that, sometimes I would question myself and think, oh my God, do I really need to eat? Like, do I really need to cook? Like, do I really need to do that? Like, when I'm at down period, it's true. That's what my brain was thinking, that, oh my God, like, really, I need to eat? Yeah, I need to eat to survive. It is like that. And I'm like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. So for a lot of us that who doesn't know how to get diagnosed and things like that, like, how do we go and actually get us diagnosed or to know more about it? Because I have heard story that one of our friends, that she went for loops and loops and loops just to try getting diagnosed. So what is there an easier way, or how can that help us more?
Probably, I'd love to say there is an easier way, and I will explain the possible pathways in a second. What I want to add, though, is the other reason midlife women are actually getting more and more midlife women are getting diagnosed is because dopamine for female bodies responds really well to estrogen. Dopamine works best when it's got its friend estrogen hanging around. And so with perimenopause, when our estrogen's declining, dopamine doesn't have its friend. And because of that, what we actually are observing is that or what we're observing is menopausal women seeing challenges more. They're more obvious. The challenges of ADHD become more obvious. A lot of women will say to me, I used to be able to blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
But they're not able to anymore, or the strategies they've implemented in their life to kind of adult well enough, as I call it, they're not able to do those things. And it's simply because it's such an important relationship between dopamine and estrogen. So when estrogen starts declining in perimenopause, the wheels start falling off. So that is another reason why this is happening a lot. And women who've known their ADHD is for a really long time will actually say that their ADHD really becomes problematic in the lead up to their period. So every month they will find either the medication less effective, or they'll find their ADHD, kind of the challenges of ADHD, more heightened. And that's a period of time just before our period where our estrogen really drops. It's called the luteal phase. And perimenopause, even though we have fluctuations, it's just an overall decline in estrogen. So this is how we're starting to understand why this is more obvious in the perimenopausal aged woman. So I just wanted to add that as well, because it's a really important rationale for why women find their wheels falling off even more so during this stage of life. But in terms of diagnosis and assessment and stuff, or assessment and diagnosis. So what I always say to my clients, if you're someone who found out that they were ADHD and you would want to consider medication, then you are going to need to be assessed by a psychiatrist, because a psychiatrist is the only one that can prescribe what's called Schedule 6 medication. And that's what ADHD medication is. It's stimulant medication. Now, you might have a psychiatrist who spends, and this still sounds like a long time, but they do the assessment, they diagnose you, and they prescribe medication, and it can take some tweaking to get it right. So you might take about 9 months to 12 months. I mean, they might jag it straight away, and the first dose they give you is amazing and perfect and wonderful. But for a lot of us, it requires a bit of tweaking. So it could be a period of time before your dose is known and stable and you've got it right. Some psychiatrists at that point will do what's called co-prescribing, which means they give your GP permission to prescribe that exact medication in an alternate fashion to them. So what it would mean is maybe every 6 months you see your psychiatrist and get your script, and then the next 6 months your GP, then it's your psychiatrist and your GP, blah, 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 blah. Not all psychiatrists will do that at all. And it certainly won't happen until your medication's stabilized. So that's the first thing, because cost comes into this. If you're someone who's going to consider medication, you're going to have to see a psychiatrist. Okay. If you're someone who either doesn't want to consider medication, you can be assessed by a psychologist with expertise in ADHD assessments. Okay. And they'll take you through a process, and they'll either say, yep, you're an ADHDer. And there's 3 different types. There's a combined type of ADHD, an inattentive type of ADHD, and a hyperactivity type of ADHD. The combined includes inattentive and hyperactivity. So you'll get, if you arrive at one of those diagnoses, or in the assessment arrive at one of those diagnoses, then you have a diagnosis, and it's a valid diagnosis, but psychologists do not have prescribing rights. Most of us don't want prescribing rights anyway. Even as I said, GPs don't have prescribing rights for this particular medication either. So it's an important thing to think about, because these things are costly, unfortunately. You will get into a psychologist sooner for a diagnosis. So if you're someone who would consider medication but can't wait, because the wait list for psychiatrists can be 6, 9, 12 months, then, and it's really important to you, and you want to start the journey of assessment and diagnosis and understanding what that means for you, then you may want to still see a psychologist, get the diagnosis. That's a report that can go through to the psychiatrist. And then when you see the psychiatrist, they'll do their assessments and prescribe. But of course, there's the double whammy of costs and stuff as well. So that's how I explain that process. To see a psychiatrist, you must have a GP referral. To see a psychologist, you only need a referral if you're seeking therapy and you want to get a Medicare rebate. An ADHD assessment is not rebatable at all. So you don't need to see a GP. Medicare will not give a rebate, whether you've got a mental health care plan or not, for any
Okay.
assessment like that.
Okay.
So it's really a matter of finding a psychologist who has expertise in ADHD, and particularly a psychologist with expertise in females, assessing females and adult females. So
Mm.
it's very different to assess a kid. It's also very different to assess a middle-aged man. The process is the same, but as I said, how it shows up for kids versus adults, men versus women and things is different. And you want someone who assesses adult women, particularly midlife women, because there is the overlay of perimenopause and menopause, and some of the symptoms, some of the challenges are the same. And this is what can be confusing. Is my brain fog and my memory issues, is that because I'm perimenopausal? Because that's really common. Is it
Mm.
because of ADHD? Is it both? Like, what is it? And so you want someone who understands that overlap so that they can, if possible, tease that apart.
That is amazing. That is what your clinic do, isn't it? Can you please
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about it? Because like I'm thinking here, okay, I need to go to a GP, then I need to go and
Mm,
do this, then I need to go to do that. Oh my God, so many loops to go to. And then you
yeah,
tell me
I know.
ADHD test is not refundable. Okay, what is the cost involved and
I
things like that?
know. I
Please
know.
tell us about it.
I know, and it is crazy because and don't forget, I've been on the end of this as an ADHD, that I will send out questionnaires myself, knowing damn well that when I got those questionnaires sent to me when I was being assessed, that I completely forgot to do them until the night before. And then it was like, shit, I've got to do those questionnaires. It was a mad panic. It's such a hilarious ADHD thing. That the very, like, we almost demonstrate our ADHDness
Mm.
in the whole process of organizing this assessment. We forget appointments. We put off making the appointments. We've got to
Yeah.
go, there's too many steps. But yes, so in terms of my assessment process, it's about $1,700 for
Okay.
my assessment process. We have lots of questions. I get you to do lots of questionnaires. Unfortunately, that's part of the process. And I do. It's really important that we have a next of kin also complete a questionnaire about you. So we
Yeah.
want someone who you feel safe enough for them to do that. And we also need someone who knows you well. Sometimes it's a partner, sometimes it's a sibling, sometimes it's your best friend. It doesn't matter really who, as long as they know you well and you feel comfortable with them contributing to the process. And then we do a couple of interviews, and those assessment sessions are about 2 hours each. So they're the person facing sessions. Then we've got the scoring and the interpretation of the questionnaires and the stuff that we're doing. And then we've got the write up. So it's quite a lengthy process, although you're only required for two lots of 2 hours. But there's a lot of stuff that we're doing in the background as well. And it's really just a matter of how I like to do it, because I don't like to waste people's money. So I start the process with somebody kind of letting me know that they want to be assessed. They can contact me through the website. They can book an initial kind of appointment. I provide some of the screening tools. There's a cost to that. And at
Mhm.
that point, when I look at those screening tools, if there's no suggestion that ADHD is valid, is
Mhm.
likely, I will give the feedback. I don't think you should proceed with this assessment. It's really saying that it's highly unlikely you've got ADHD. I don't want to waste your money. Now,
Mhm.
some people have chosen to still continue.
Yeah.
That's their choice, and there's cost associated with completing the process, of course. But
Yeah.
I'd rather not waste people's money. So if the
Yeah.
screening measures are really saying it's highly unlikely, I want to tell people that, and then they've got the ability, informed consent, to say, thank you, no worries, and off they go. That's it, they've done that. Or yes, let's continue. So
Mm.
that's how my process unfolds. And then I write a report, which is yours, or the clients and things. And if they've since kind of found a psychiatrist, or some time down the track they get a psychiatrist, I get the details so that I can forward that report directly to the psychiatrist and make myself available if the psychiatrist wanted to talk to me as well. So that's kind of the process that I go through. We have to talk about childhood. We have to get a proper assessment that is legitimate and would be recognized as such. We start from, tell me about your childhood, tell me about family, tell me about school, tell me about education, university, your employment history, your relationships, from the beginning until the day I'm seeing them. So it's a really big process. We also need to be looking for any other possible explanations for some of the challenges that they might be having. Maybe there's mental health issues in there. It doesn't mean you can have an anxiety disorder and ADHD. But the other thing we know is that a lot of females have been misdiagnosed with anxiety and depression when really it's ADHD, or they haven't had a diagnosis of ADHD, which has led to challenges in life that have caused either anxiety or depression. So they're legitimate problems, but the primary diagnosis is ADHD with what we'd say is either secondary anxiety and or depression, which what that kind of means is ADHD has caused the anxiety or ADHD has caused the depression. So we've got to rule out stuff as well. It's not a quick process for us behind the scenes. There's a lot of thinking, a lot of, looking at what you've said and questionnaires and all that kind of stuff that we're looking at. Yeah.
That is so good. It is a lot. And I'm like, wow, this is really opening our eyes up to like not just finding that menopause is hard to go through and just fixing the menopause issue. It is also what is going through behind the scene. And I hear you that a lot of us get misdiagnosis for everything in life because it is about like perception. It is part science, but it's also about the perception and the experience and the knowledge of your assessor. If your assessor doesn't have that information about ADHD and all the other stuff, you're not going to be a diagnosed to it. It's like that you're asking a butcher to tell you how to draw a painting instead of to tell you how to cut a meat. It's a completely different way of doing it. And today you really open our eyes and seeing that there is another way. So for our listeners over there, please tell them how do they actually get in contact with you. I have put your social media handle and your business stuff into our chat here. But for those who are listening, please tell them.
Yeah, so my website is the allabouthercentre.com.au. There's a bit about me as the founder, but also if you were to look at the locations, heading and look for WA, then you can find me there, and that's where you'll find the book with me button. Now I can do these assessments online. You don't have to be living in Perth for me to be able to do them. And basically when you click the book online, there'll be a number of different options and you'll be choosing those that are relevant to ADHD, which is the kind of there's a preliminary one, and that's the one that you'll book for first. So yeah, I mean, my books are somewhat full, like most psychologists who work with ADHD. But definitely you definitely get in more quickly to me than a psychiatrist. And as I said, it's just for those who really want to know sooner rather than later, or they're not thinking of medication, then that would be a good place to start. And then for some people, that's all they want to know. And off they go. They've got a diagnosis and off they go and they read for themselves and they, make sense of what it means for themselves. I get a lot of women, though, who just want a number of sessions where we work out how the ADHD plays out in their life and look for ways to support them in perhaps really leveraging off the strengths of ADHD, because ADHD is like, I said I was obsessed with this before. When we get obsessed about something, we are so committed, passionate, and we know so much about it because we learn so freaking much about it. It becomes living and breathing. We're very creative. We're often very entrepreneurial.
Yes.
Like there's so many good things about ADHD. It explains my entire career, which I would say my career's been fantastic. Like I'm so fortunate. Having said that, I've also played a role in creating the career that I've had, and my ADHD has really fueled that. So some women want to have some time with someone like myself to make sense of where has it been a really great thing for
Yeah.
me and where is it difficult. That kind of work will fit under a mental health care plan. Once we
Okay.
move into kind of that therapeutic space, then you can access those 10 sessions Medicare, that Medicare rebates and stuff like that with a GP referral. It's just the assessment process that you can't get under that Medicare rebate.
Oh, that is really good to know because yes, cost is one of the things that we have to consider in the
Yeah.
living day world, but just consider what how much better and how much more clarity you will get once you
Mm,
know what's going on in your mind and your body. This is something that I did not appreciate, say, 8 months ago. I
mm,
really appreciate it now that I
yeah.
have more knowledge from all the
Mm,
experts that we have spoken to, from all the learning that I got in
mm,
this place. And it
mm.
really gives us that extra help into understanding and planning for our future. Because without
Absolutely.
knowing, we don't know
Mm,
what to do next. And with
yeah.
all this expertise that we have in our community here,
Mm,
that's what's making a difference.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Kirsten, by giving us your expertise in it. And it
You're
is just been
welcome.
so
My
insightful
pleasure.
today. Loving, I'm definitely sharing it everywhere and letting everyone knows about it too, because I didn't know that I'm suffering from ADHD. And now that I'm thinking about what you say, I'm like 90% sure I have ADHD onto it. But of course, getting
Maybe.
a proper assessment is what's important. So
Yeah,
everyone do seek out the help that you need. There's lots of help available. And if you
very.
wanted to contact Kirsten, go into our show note and have a look at her contact. Thank you once again, Kirsten, for
My
joining us
pleasure.
on Wisdom Wednesday. Thank you for everyone's for joining us live and also listening back to the replay. We look forward to see you at our next episode. Thank you again.
Thank you.